And we get to be in conversation today with one of those brilliant change makers, Barbara Jo Davis. And we're very fortunate that MNHS Press author JoJo Bell has agreed to moderate the conversation. We couldn't have asked for a better pairing today. Very exciting. Join me in welcoming to the Minnesota History Center the one and only Barbara Jo Davis.
Thank you for having me, and I'm really excited to talk and have a conversation with Barbara Jo today. As you guys may have known already before today, or maybe just learned, but she has a very remarkable career and is a remarkable woman. So I just wanted to talk about...
Or so she thinks.
Well, so far, just chatting with you before, I think it's true. And I also just want to start with Happy Valentine's Day, by the way. We talked about this. This is not Valentine's Day red. This is Betty Crocker red.
That's right.
So yeah. So I just wanted to actually just make a little note about kind of the history of General Mills in Minnesota, which I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with. But it has a larger history, right? That traces its roots back to right the Washburn Mill in 1865. And of course, we have that recognizable figure, Betty Crocker, that comes out of this, right? That starts as a figure that kind of gives out advice for recipes and culminates to what we recognize today. And also, obviously, the Betty Crocker book that is published in 1950. And then, Barbara, you encountered that world at a young age, right? So I'd just love to begin there, and if you could just share how you discovered Betty Crocker. You mentioned a little bit in the film, but you said when you were 14, you saw the book. So I was just wondering, what about that book grabbed your attention at 14?
Like I said, when I was 14, I got my first Betty Crocker's cookbook, and I looked in there, and there were women in the pictures, and they were working in the kitchens, and I thought, well, I could do that. And my mother looked at me and said, "You don't see any black folks in that picture, do you?" And I said, "Well, there should be." So, so my goal then was to be Betty Crocker. So I went to school and did all these food classes and marketing classes and more food classes. And then I applied for an internship at Betty Crocker. And they said, "We don't do internships." And so then they said, "Well, maybe you could go work in our little test that we're doing a research project in Ohio, so maybe you could go work there for a while." So I went and worked there, and they were researching whether executive men were more likely to get heart disease than the regular population. So I got to meet all these, highfalutin executive men. Unfortunately, none of them turned out to be Ken, but their loss. So then, after I had done that for a while, I finally got my job in the Betty Crocker kitchens. And I was delighted because I loved the work, and I loved working with the marketing people, as annoying as they could be. But I loved it anyway, and so I worked there for 20 years. And I got too old, and so they threw me out. Put me out to pasture. But in the meantime, I had met Ken, and we started our barbecue sauce business. The way we met was somebody recommended, he had this restaurant, and somebody recommended me to him because they saw he was black, and I was black, and he was single, and I was single. So they told me I needed to meet this guy because he needed some help. So he called me up out of the blue one day and said, "I want you to come look at my barbecue sauce." Well, usually guys wanted you to come look at their records or their photographs or their whatevers. But he wanted me to look at his barbecue sauce, so I said, oh, well, this is a strange way to approach somebody. So I went to look at his barbecue sauce, and we made, I don't know how many dozens of batches, until we got one, and he said, that's the closest to my grandmother's as I can remember. So my contribution to the general, if I could figure out what decade I'm in, you know, you get old. My contribution to the Ken Davis barbecue sauce was that I wrote it down. So after that, he had two choices. He could either shoot me or marry me. He, fortunately for me, chose to marry me. And we were married very happily. We didn't have any children, but he had children of his own, so I had stepchildren. Fortunately, they were all almost, if not already grown, so I didn't have to raise them from little kids, for which I was grateful. They were bad enough as adults. Do you want me to say
Yeah. Well, you know, I thought it was really interesting, just your trajectory of your career, but where you come from. So you were born in Wyoming, and
No,
right?
I wasn't.
Oh, you weren't? Where were you born?
No, I wasn't born in Wyoming.
Where?
I was born in New Mexico.
Oh my gosh.
My
Oh,
mother,
wow.
my mother was working for a family. They had a summer home, no, winter home, I don't know. Anyway, one of those away from home homes in New Mexico. And my dad was working as a chef there in the same complex. And they got to know each other. And next thing you knew, they were married, and they moved to Denver first and then to Cheyenne, Wyoming. When I was 5 years old, my dad was ready to take a job someplace else, and my mother said, I like it here, the schools are good here, I want to raise our daughter here. If you want to go, you can go.
Wow. It's like I'm
They
staying put.
didn't go.
Yeah. Well, I just do think it's interesting, and I think that still fits, right? You're coming from the West and then to the Midwest. Did you find that because you already kind of were culturally like a Western person, like was it easier to kind of fit into the scene here, or what was it like when you finally came to Minneapolis and Minnesota?
Well, I guess I've been kind of an independent person my entire life, and it didn't bother me. I moved first to D.C., where I did an internship, and then I moved to Dayton, Ohio for a while and worked in a hospital. And then I got my opportunity to work for Betty Crocker, so I moved here. And people would say to me, well, those places you went, did you know anybody? I said, no, but I would know somebody before long. And sure enough, I did. And pretty soon I knew just about everybody in Minneapolis.
Yes, I can see that for sure. Which is awesome, right? To have that kind of personality where you connect with people, right? So I do want to go back because you mentioned your mother, and she got her own degree in food services. Is that correct?
Yes, my mother worked as a cook for a while, and then she went back to school and learned how to do it the right way.
Yeah.
She was a great cook. And so, yeah, and my father was a chef, so I came by my interest in food quite naturally.
Yeah. Okay, so knowing that, who do you think was the better cook, your mom or your dad?
Well, my mother cooked at home, my dad cooked in restaurants.
Yeah. So, Mom. Yeah. You're like, that's an easy choice.
But I have to say, having him work in restaurants was great background for me because I got exposed to foods that I would never get exposed to at home. So he'd bring home stuff that was left over from the parties that he would cater, and I got to know lots of stuff I'd never heard of, like escargot. What the heck is that? And then he told me, and I said, I'm not eating that.
Oh my gosh. You're like, no, thank you.
But I did. I'll eat almost anything that doesn't eat me first.
Yeah. I just think it's so interesting because you think about your mom in the food services and getting her degree when she did, and then if we take a look, I mean, it's kind of on a loop right now, But if we look at the Betty Crockers through the years, you know, they're all white women. And you mentioned when you told your mother that you were interested in this, she's like, you don't see any black people in there, right? So when you finally broke into the scene in General Mills and being in the Betty Crocker test kitchen, do you remember, like, did she ever talk to you about that, her reaction to you actually breaking those barriers?
Did my mother ever talk to me about
Yeah.
that? I think, no, she just was very proud of me that I had been able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure, you
I was pretty proud of myself.
yeah, as you should be, and I'm sure she, right, kind of processed that you were. I'm sure you really surprised her in a really good way, right? Processing that something she thought wasn't maybe possible, you made possible.
Yeah. I never. It never seemed to be impossible to me. Whatever I did in life, I said, well, I can do that.
Yeah.
People said, well, you're moving to Minneapolis. Do you know anybody there? No, but I will. Look at all these people I know now.
Right. Yes. And you've got a row full of friends in the front seat here as well.
Yeah, my front row people here.
Yeah. So when you did get your degree in dietetics, and that was at the University of, was that Northern Colorado?
Northern Colorado.
Yeah. Was it diverse there? Was it not so much
Oh,
at
I
the time?
think it was it's a small college at the time. I think there were about maybe 9,000 students on campus, and there were like 6 of us, black people. So
Wow.
I grew up in a community that had black people, but not very many. And my father was probably the world's most comfortable person. He had friends in all kinds of denominations and all kinds of colorations, and he never said anything bad about anybody.
Yeah.
My mother was a little more, well, I don't know if I need to know him or not. So. But then my dad would bring people home, so we'd have to, entertain.
Yeah.
So I got to learn cooking from both sides.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And then what about your father? What did he think about your career?
Oh, he was just blown up with pride, but he didn't live long after I started working at Betty Crocker. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad, he got to see some of that,
Yeah.
Again, you breaking barriers there. So you mentioned in the movie that in 1968 you got a call from General Mills, right, to come work for them. But you also mentioned that you applied to an internship. So do you know if they heard about your your work first in terms of you're getting your degree and you were applying that way? So yeah, just expand on that.
You want to know why they hired me at Betty Crocker?
Yes.
Because I'm a sweet talker, that's why. I just sweet talked them into hiring me.
Yeah. Do you remember what the interview was like for that? What was that process like?
Actually, I wasn't directly hired in the Betty Crocker kitchens,
Okay.
but that was my goal.
Yeah.
So I interviewed with the nutrition department because I had a degree in dietetics, and they hired me. Little did they know. Because I was sliding out the door to the
You had your own plans.
kitchens the whole time.
Yep.
So I did work in the nutrition department for a couple of years.
Okay. All right. That's awesome. And then can you, just for the audience members and myself maybe who are not very super familiar, but what does the home economist do? What are some of the main things for your role?
At Betty Crocker, we did a lot of different things. Primarily, our goal was to make sure that consumers could use our products. So we would work with the people at the research center, and then they would, when they thought the product was ready for market, they would send it over to us, and we would do what we called testing to make sure that it worked in consumers' homes, which meant we had to use different measuring cups, we had to use gas ovens and electric ovens, we had to use whatever there was available in the home, we had to make sure that we were kind of simulating that so that when our package directions were written, people wouldn't get confused. Except for the woman who, we had a recipe on one of our boxes, and I don't remember what product it was, and it said, heat a can of sweetened condensed milk and do blah, blah, blah to it. Anyway, she didn't open the can or anything. She just put the can in a pan and started heating it, and the darn thing exploded on her. So she was very upset with us, because we didn't say, open the can, pour it into the pan. Anyway, I had a lot of fun in the Betty Crocker kitchen, so I loved my work.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about what the environment was like in the test kitchen? So it sounds like a lot of it was scientific, and you also mentioned in the movie how when you guys were doing the tours, people thought you guys were actresses. How did you kind of balance that?
Yes, well, we had the tours, like all those people out there. They were standing outside our kitchen, and we were trying to do our work. And they thought, well, those must be actresses. The real work is done back behind those curtains back there. I said, yeah, I wish. One time I boiled something over on the stove, and they were like,
They're like, oh my
I said,
God.
hey, it's real cooking in
Yeah,
there.
right.
So, yeah.
Did you guys ever give them demonstrations like that in terms of like just showing them that it was a real test kitchen and that you guys were real food scientists?
We tried not to.
Oh, yeah?
We tried to ignore the tours.
Yeah.
I remember one woman walked into the kitchen one day, picked up my wooden spoon and said, I have one like that, put it back down.
Oh, my God.
Do I care?
Yeah.
It was a wooden spoon. It wasn't even a Betty Crocker spoon. It was just a regular old wooden spoon.
Oh, my God. Did at any point you guys think of, and did this stop, where you stopped doing tours like that? Or?
Oh, they finally quit doing the tours after.
Yeah.
But it was shortly before I left that they stopped doing the tours.
Right. Yeah.
It was kind of interesting because, you know, you'd be on your way to the bathroom and they would be so intense on getting to the kitchens that they wouldn't even let you through.
Oh
So
my
excuse me, but I have to go.
Oh my gosh. So, you know, we talked about Betty Crocker Red today, and then on the film you talked about the Betty Crocker way. For those of us who may not be familiar, how would you define the Betty Crocker way of cooking?
The Betty Crocker way I would define as being very concerned about the consumer and making sure that what we did would reflect well on General Mills and the products. Although I have to say that a lot of people did not know that Betty Crocker was General Mills. Right. And so we had to represent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, through the Betty Crocker Test Kitchen, you had roles in developing things like Bisquick, Metal Flour, and Hamburger Helper. So
Hamburger Helper was one of my first products. Yeah. They were just starting to develop it. They just did some market research and found out that women were using hamburger at least once a week. And then they ran out of ideas of what to do with it. So we started developing Hamburger Helper, and that's where it came from. I was lucky to take my 5 skillets in a suitcase and go on the road to do some consumer testing before we introduced the product.
Okay, so did you do that in people's homes? Like,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because nobody had 5 skillets.
Right. You're like, I had.
And so I couldn't demonstrate the 5 flavors.
Right.
So I had to carry my own skillets
Oh, wow.
in a suitcase.
So like all over the Midwest, or like all over the country?
All over the country.
Oh, wow.
I was in San Francisco, and I was in Dallas, and I was in Denver, and we went around.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Skillets and all.
Skillets and all. Skillets and hamburger, no, I'm kidding. So, you know, like, and I just want to pause to reflect on, like, it's a Hamburger Helper, right? And I think of it, of course it's a national thing, but I kind of think of it as a Midwestern thing too. But you also had a hand in developing hot dish Hamburger Helper, is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and I mean, I'm sure most of us are maybe from here, but we all know how special hot dish is to us, and right, just thinking about its origins and around the Depression era, right? People trying
At my house, hot dishes are all hot.
Right.
And spicy. You can ask Phyllis, she'll tell you.
Yeah, and thinking about kind of that tradition of that, starting in the Depression and trying to make things affordable and using hamburger when you can. So I just wonder, what about trying to develop, what made you want to develop hot dish Hamburger Helper?
Well, we knew that consumers were using hamburgers several times a week, and then so we decided, well, we'll do hamburger helper, and then they'll have some idea of what to do with it. And we'd always have some extra recipe, or at least one extra recipe on the box, so that they could do it some other way than just right out of the box.
Right.
And yeah, we just wanted to, I think the Betty Crocker tradition was just wanting to be helpful to consumers.
Yeah. So what was your, well, two questions, I guess. What was your favorite product? And then also, what was your favorite Hamburger Helper?
Oh, jeez.
You could answer either one of those.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think my favorite product was brownies.
Oh.
Unfortunately, I smelled brownies all day, every day. And now when my roommate wants to make brownies, I'm like, I have to smell brownies again.
Not again, right? So I also thought it was thinking about, how you're developing recipes and everything, the writing instructions. Now you've already kind of given us a little insight to, having to be really detailed, right? When we think about the condensed milk and what words you could and could not use, or had to think about it like pricking a can. Were there any other, things like that happened while you were writing instructions that maybe people, confused people, or words you couldn't use that you could think of?
I don't know, we were pretty careful with our package directions. Mm-hmm. And I only worked in the cookbook area for a short time, just shortly before I left General Mills. Mm-hmm. So, and I think the Betty Crocker cookbooks were written to be specific enough that people could follow the directions. Mm-hmm. And we felt the same way about the directions on our packaged products. Mm-hmm. And we also tested them among consumers before we put them on the market.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So did you invite the consumers in? No,
we just send out, we had a volunteer list, and we would send the product home with people to try it home, and if they had problems with it, then we could change the directions or whatever we needed to do.
Yeah. Is there anything that you worked on that you felt maybe didn't work with the consumers the way you thought it would?
Did I work on products that I didn't think were worth the...
No.
Oh,
No, that maybe that you had an idea of how the product would be cooked right at home, but then didn't work out for the consumer? Like that you had to kind of re-engineer?
We had a cake mix once that did not work out for the consumer.
Yeah.
They got so mad at us, some of them would mail their cakes back to us.
Oh my God!
To show us that they had fallen or whatever had happened to them. So the mailman would come and he'd have a truck full of cakes.
That's insane.
It was pretty funny.
Wow.
We didn't think it was funny at the time, but in retrospect.
That's a lot of effort, right? To package a cake. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. So if this is correct too, you were the second Black woman. Were you the second Black woman at General Mills or in the Betty Crocker test kitchen?
Would you repeat that question?
Yeah, were you the second black woman in the test kitchens or at General Mills at the time?
I was the second one in the test kitchen.
Okay.
She left before I came, so I didn't even get a chance to meet her. But yeah, there was one black woman in the kitchens before I came.
Okay. So, I would imagine, right, that would be a tough environment to be in, but yeah.
Well, having grown up in Cheyenne, where there weren't that many black people, the ones that were there usually had either been in the Air Force or worked on the railroad and settled there. So there weren't a lot of us in Cheyenne. But my father was was the kind of person who accepted people for what they were. And so he never said a bad word about anybody, ever. And he didn't care how bad they were. He would not say a bad word about them. And I grew up in that environment, and people are people as far as I was concerned. And whether they accepted me or not, I didn't care because I talked to them anyway.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it seems like your personality was just kind of like uniquely suited to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you said a lot of that you think came from your father.
Yeah, I guess I'm the kind of person who never meets a stranger.
Yeah. Did you experience anything where it's like, even though you were open, maybe some of the people in the test kitchen weren't as open to you?
Oh yeah, there's always people like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're like...
That's their problem. I always say it's their problem. Their loss.
Yeah.
They don't get to know me, it's their loss.
Yeah. And I mean, that kind of is the mentality you have to have, right?
Yeah.
To especially to have such
It really
a long
is.
career that you had there. Yeah. How do you think it changed over the decades then from when you were in the nutrition department to when you went to Betty Crocker to by the time you retired, in terms of even diversity or just attitudes toward you in general?
At General Mills, I don't think the attitudes change very much because they seem to be very open. I hardly ever met anybody that was kind of standoffish.
Right.
And in the population in general, I know I used to get looks all the time, like, what's she doing here? And I'd look back and wonder, well, why are you here? You're here to shop, I'm here to shop.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So I never let racism stand in my way. I can't.
Yeah.
It's their problem, not mine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's really interesting, too, that you kind of mentioned in general, right? And I'm thinking about Minnesota as a whole. And, you said your husband, Ken, called you up to test out the barbecue recipe. But he had a restaurant in Edina, right?
Yes, he had a restaurant in Edina.
Yeah. So what was the restaurant scene like, in Edina for Ken, for you guys when you were?
Well, it's interesting because when he bought the place, and then he took his car and he drove around Edina and introduced himself to people, and introduced himself to the store owners in the area, and let them know that he was going to be there.
Right.
So they were prepared. They wouldn't be shocked. There's a black man in our neighborhood. So he was, he and I were very much the same in that respect. We just never met a person that was a stranger.
Yeah. And do you remember some of the other competing restaurants, or did it not feel so much like competing, but like?
Well, I don't really think he felt that he was competing in the restaurant because there wasn't one like his anyplace. He specialized in ribs and that kind of food, barbecue food, and there just wasn't another competitor in the area, so people came to him. And he hired teenagers from the neighborhood to in his restaurant, so
Yeah.
he had an in.
Yeah. And I thought it was really interesting, and it really tied to what you said about there being no other restaurant like it, especially even in Edina. And you said, you guys worked on it until he said he got close to what he remembered his grandmother's recipe being. Yeah. Did he have any other influences besides his grandmother on the barbecue sauce, or just what he was doing in his restaurant? Was it really? Where was she from? I guess what am I asking?
My mother.
Yeah, no, his grandmother.
Both of my parents grew up in South Texas, in the segregated South.
Okay.
And one of the reasons they had moved north was to get away from that. And my father was the kind of person that I am, and he didn't meet any strangers, and he didn't care what color they were. My mother was a little more standoffish.
Yeah, yeah.
She'd say, well, I better check this out before I go walking up to that person.
Yeah.
See if she's giving me dirty looks.
She's just making sure.
She'd make sure my dad and I, we didn't care.
Yeah.
If they didn't want us to talk to them, they'd just walk away. I don't care.
But I do wonder, how their food traditions, impacted you, and how Ken's parents. If there's anything that you think really impacted the way you cooked, because like you said, there was just no one doing that in Edina at the time. Obviously things have changed now. We have so many different, even soul food restaurants in Minnesota, but you guys were one of the first. So I just wonder if you could share with us some of those maybe Southern traditions, or even Midwest traditions that kind of went into either the sauce or just how he ran the business.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I had never been in business before. I mean, I had worked for businesses, but neither of my parents owned a business. And so this was all new to me. And I had to learn how to keep the record straight. And I finally said to him one day, Ken, you have to hire a bookkeeper. I am not a numbers person. I'm a words person. I'll write anything you want me to write, but don't ask me to do the books. So we came to that, agreement. I help him with the cooking and the product development and all that, but I'm not doing the books. That's what we hired Phyllis for.
Phyllis was on the books. And I think it's really interesting that you mentioned, when Ken passed, you took over the business.
That was interesting, too, because people come up to me and say, well, a lady like you couldn't run a business. And I said, watch me. Just watch me.
And how long did you run it after his passing?
Oh, tell me, Phyllis, how long did I weep?
Wow. Wow.
10 years. Okay. I knew you knew the numbers. I'm a words person.
Yeah.
Phyllis was our bookkeeper in the old days.
Yeah.
Now she still keeps my books because I don't know what I'm doing. I have money, I spend it.
Yes.
Buy
I feel
more
that.
clothes.
Yeah. So 20 years of running that, did you have more than just the person who called you up before? Did you have a lot of people calling to ask if you wanted to sell the business?
After Ken passed away, yeah, people called and wanting, they'd go, oh, little lady like you shouldn't be running a business. I said, oh yeah? Watch me.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I had several offers.
Yeah. And do you feel like it was more important that you run it how you felt it should be, or for Ken's legacy as well, or just you could never imagine selling kind of
Well, I only knew one way to run it, and that was my way, so.
Yeah.
That's what, yes.
Who did she sell it to, and why did she sell it?
Good question.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, I sold it to a couple of guys that we had known for a long time. And I sold it because I didn't want to run it anymore. That was that simple. And I retired.
Yeah.
So when I was ready to retire, I thought, well, I don't have to go to work every day if I'm retired.
Right.
So sold the business.
Yeah, so it
I
can.
wonder if they're still in business. I see the product's still on the market. So well, somebody's running it.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. If you ever have like tasted any of the products since then.
What?
See if
We're
they're
gonna have to
the
send her
same.
some Ken Davis barbecue sauce.
Oh no, I mean if you've tasted any since it was sold.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, yeah. But
I
they
always
didn't
have
change
it on the
it.
shelf in my house.
Yeah.
The sweet and sassy one.
Yeah. You said that was named after you. Yeah, I do just wonder, I wonder if that was a part of the worry of selling it, is if they would have changed the formula.
No, it was in the contract.
Yeah, that makes sense. So looking back at your career, what advice would you give a young home economist or just a Black woman entering a corporate field, at the level that you did all those years?
Just act like you don't know the difference. And sooner or later you'll find out they'll be treating you the same way as if they didn't know the difference. If you treat them like you don't know the difference, then soon enough they'll be treating you the same way.
That's awesome. And then, are there any particular moments from your time at General Mills, or even in your business ventures, that you hope Minnesotans will remember? Like, what would you want someone to take away from your legacy, or even yours and Ken's legacy?
Well, I think when people see Ken Davis barbecue sauce, I want them to know that there was a real person behind it. And I also want them to know that if they, as we did when he was alive, if they have a problem with the product in any way, they can feel free to call. I mean, we want them to know that there's a real person behind the business and that it's local. And if they have problems, they can still call me to this day if they want to. No one's done that.
Okay. So don't start
But
calling.
I don't see why, unless it's a friend that has a problem with the sauce, but no one's called me to say, we don't like your sauce. Your sauce is too hot. Actually, when we first started in business, people used to refer to it as the hot sauce.
Oh my gosh.
Because they
that
weren't
makes sense.
familiar with
Yep.
many sauces at that time. And they just assumed it was hot,
Yep. Yeah.
which it wasn't.
And no, it's just for Minnesotans hot, maybe, right?
Minnesota hot, yeah.
Yeah, Minnesota. Yeah, I just think, if you feel okay with that, I think it might be a good time to open it up to the audience, maybe, for some Q&A.
Now I'm in trouble.
This is a great opportunity for us to continue the conversation, to hand it over to all of you. I'm sure you have questions or maybe even memories. I know someone brought some pictures of their father at General Mills. Actually, do you mind sharing that with the audience, what you brought and shared with Barbara Jo Davis?
My dad was the personnel director at General Mills for his entire career. And so I asked her if she happened to know him, and she said she did.
Absolutely.
And he loved working there. Here's one of his work pictures. I don't know if you can all see it.
Oh, sure they can. Especially those ones way back there.
Yeah. And then we went to the Betty Crocker kitchens all the time because he worked there, and we had so much fun every time. And then it would always conclude with a program in the auditorium with a lot of history of General Mills. But then at one point along the line, my sisters and I, they had a magazine. I think it came out every month, the Millwell magazine, it was called, General Mills. Anyway, they had a magazine, and my sisters and I got to be in the magazine demonstrating the little Betty Crocker cooking kits for kids.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And each of us got one to take home, and then so poor Dad had to come home every night after work to the little cakes that we made. And we put like blue food coloring in them.
Oh, yes.
But he was always really good about it. So anyway, lots of fond memories of General Mills. That's for absolute certain.
Great. We have a question or comment down here?
Uh-oh.
No,
Now I'm in trouble.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you pay attention to what General Mills is doing now to their products and if you use any of them.
Of course I use.
Are you just saying
I
that?
use gold medal flour.
You're not just saying that, are you?
That's the only one I use, actually.
Oh, okay. But I mean, did they make something else besides the flour that you use? I don't even know because I'm gluten-free, so I don't
No,
do
I
any of theirs.
I'm more of a scratch cook.
Oh.
So I use the flour, but I don't use any of the mixes.
I have a comment. I worked for Pillsbury and I worked on brownie mix.
Huh?
And so we were always trying to emulate Duncan Hines.
Oh,
Betty
yes, we were
Crocker
too, yes.
Brownie mix. because they
Duncan
were the
Hines
best
was
ones
the-
on the market.
Duncan Hines was
Good to
the,
see you, Barbara Jo.
was the kingpin. We had to, if we could beat Duncan Hines, we were saying something.
Back to the Minnesota palate. When you were in the test kitchen and you came from New Mexico and your parents from Texas area, Wyoming, was there Minnesota, especially back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, has that forgive me, bland palate. Did you ever try to excuse me, suggest that they add a little bit more in the kitchen, in the ingredients, even if it was more cinnamon, more cloves, more? Did you have to fight that?
Well, actually, it wasn't just Minnesota. So we always had to be careful not to make things too spicy. Don't put, and you know, I, having grown up in a house that had lots of spices, two of us would stand at the counter and people would be showing us what they had made that day. And she'd be at one end of the line and she'd say, needs salt. I'd be at the other end of the line and say, needs pepper.
All right. Oh,
Yes.
question right here.
Hi, Ms. Davis. I was wondering, in some of the feedback where you said that people were returning cakes that were not successful, did you get a lot of response via mail or phone calls about some of the successful products that you created?
We got a lot of phone calls and letters from people who had unsuccessful products. In fact, we came out with this one cake mix, which I don't even remember the name of at this point. But yeah, it didn't work real well, in spite of our tolerance testing. And so people started mailing their cakes back to us. I have to show you my cake, it fell in the middle. I'm like, you don't have to show me, just write me a letter. You know, so the mailman would come with these bunches of cakes that people were mailing back to us. So that cake mix didn't last long because it just didn't work well. But we did do something we call tolerance testing, and we hoped that it worked because we would test it in different ovens and we would test it with different measurements because not everybody had measuring cups. They just used, you know, regular teacups. And we'd do all that testing to make sure it worked, but sometimes it just didn't work. And there was that one product that just didn't work.
Thank you.
From Lisa F. She asks, Hamburger hot dish and spices question has me wondering if you develop different recipes for different parts of the country or based on regional specialties.
No. We always wanted our products to be universal, so even though we did home test them before we put them on the market, but they were tested by Minnesotans, so what can I say?
Ms. Davis, thank you for sharing your story with us this morning. The thing that I'm curious about your thoughts and opinions on, it seems like we've traveled quite a distance from the Betty Crocker of years gone by and the role of the woman, especially in the kitchen, in the home, as the homemaker. And now we often experience and see cooking on television and on Netflix as like a competition, and it's over the top and feels almost unachievable to the average American. How do we maybe have a resurgence of the feeling of spending time in the kitchen as care for family and maybe less time with convenience, but still using what, General Mills created?
That's an interesting question, because I've noticed also that in spite of the fact that there are lots of convenience foods on the market, every once in a while I think just about every family will have something that grandma used to make or something like that. But yeah, there's no way we're going to fight convenience foods, because women are busy. They have jobs and kids and dogs, and they've got to take care of.
Audrey asks, what is your favorite meal to make for yourself?
My favorite meal to make for myself. Hamburger helper. No. I don't know if I have a favorite meal. I like to cook, so it's a variety of foods. She says, my roommate down there says it's gumbo. I like to make gumbo. Oh, you said that. Oh, you like my gumbo? Oh, okay. I'll continue. I have a tradition of making Christmas Eve gumbo. So, yeah.
Yes, and then Lisa F. asks, were you and the test kitchen cooks involved in developing ideas for products?
Yes. I remember specifically, and the only reason I remember this one specifically is that I had the worst stomach ache of my life after we were doing the testing. But they were trying to develop a cheesecake mix. So in order to come up with a prototype, we had to go out and get every kind of cheesecake we could find, already made ones, cheesecake mixes, restaurant cheesecakes, and we had this whole spread of cheesecakes, and we had to taste them all. And I'd be tasting, and somebody would say, oh, I thought number 13 had a lemony flavor to it, and I'd look at my sheet and I'd say, I don't remember any lemony flavor. So you'd taste it again. And it didn't matter if you spit it out after you tasted it. It didn't matter, because you still had the stomach ache after you'd eaten all those cheesecakes.
And lastly, somebody online, Kathy, says, thank you for presenting this program. I am in Iowa. I'm a dietitian of 40 years. I love to cook for and with family and friends. Thank you for sharing your story. Very inspiring to keep cooking and sharing joy in the kitchen.
Thank you.
Here, Ms. Davis. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. I'm curious, did working professionally with food, whether at General Mills or in the barbecue business, did it change how you cooked at home, or did it change your relationship personally with friends and family with food in any way?
Well, the one thing I learned from working in the Betty Crocker kitchens is that sometimes you have to measure. Now, if you're just, making your stuff at home, you may or may not measure, but if you're baking, you really should measure. Was that a comment? Kind of, sort of. Oh, you have to kind of, sort of measure.
So there were all those women. Were there ever any men that integrated the cooking kitchen?
Well, it's kind of.
I mean,
For a long time, I was the only black person in the kitchens, but then we hired a couple of more women from the South because we didn't have any representation in that part of the country. And then we hired a man, and
Was
so
that Lance?
as far as I know, there's still some variety there, but I don't know that for a fact because I haven't been there lately.
maybe you want to take a tour.
Oh, we'll take one more question before we head to our reception. Here we go.
By the way, I'm a graduate of the University of Northern Colorado.
Okay, so I have a question regarding the hot dishes, the hamburger helper types of things.
Yeah?
Coincidentally, about a week ago, I made one of them again. It had been a while, but there's never something that I don't do what I'll call my mother modifications. I never make something according to any recipe. And in particular, this one was a chicken helper that I added, let's see, more pasta, a can of cream of corn soup, and creamed corn. There we go, creamed corn. I'm wondering, what would be your favorite or a addition to one of the hamburger helpers that you can think of? Because I'll probably use it. What would be a good a good addition? The creamed corn ended up perfect. I loved it. But there's my question.
Well, I like carrots. But if I were adding something to the hamburger helper, I would add something hot, spicy. So, a few chili peppers in there would make everything all right with me.
Excellent. Before we wrap up, Barbara Jo Davis, is there any wisdom you'd like to leave us with today before we leave this auditorium?
I'll say what one of my cooking instructors said when I was in college. Just tell them if they don't like the food, they can go to McDonald's.
All right. Yeah, Barbara Jo Davis, everyone.